But make tefillah, prayer, that your flight is not in the winter, neither on the Shabbat. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the Olam Hazeh to this time, no, nor ever shall be. I used to think that this verse here in Matthew chapter 20 was talking about the literal winter and Shabbat. Of course, you wouldn't want to have to flee in the winter due to the weather, storms, extreme temperatures, etc. That's a really bad situation, and even more so when you're speaking of children or the elderly, or anyone without sufficient resources, which, if all you have is what you can carry on your back, you can be sure you won't have sufficient resources when you're talking about anything more than a week at best. And that's just considering the weather and not any other events and other things that would be going on. I also used to think that this verse may be pointing to a general time of the year of when some of the major events in these last days during the tribulation may occur. However, during the last week or so, actually it was around Passover Day, this verse came back to my mind along with a perspective that I hadn't really considered before. Looking at it now, though, it makes perfect sense as it goes right in step with all the other examples that we've seen throughout the Word. Here's a question to think about while we go forward in this video. What does the winter and the Shabbat have in common? Let's go to Gilyanah, chapter 12, verse 14. And to the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and half a time from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth Mayim, or water, as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. And the ground helped the woman, and the land opened her mouth, and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was angry with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her Zerah, her seed, that Shomer, which is to keep, observe, or guard, the mitzvos, or commandments of Yahuwah, and have the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach. We've talked about this verse many times in past newsletters and teachings. There is a lot in these verses here. Today we're only going to look at one point. Why did the woman fly into the wilderness? Was it to get away from the flood sent by the serpent? Not exactly. If you go back and read the verses again, the woman had already fled into the wilderness before the flood was even sent. The woman, who is the remnant of Israel, fled because of what she saw that was going to happen, not from what was already happening. In other words, she takes preemptive action instead of waiting until it happens and then trying to react what has already happened. What's the difference between preemptive action and reaction? I'm going to use a very crude example, which I think most people today is more along the lines of something they can relate to. 2 people in 2 different cars are driving down the highway. In front of them, there's a truck carrying a large load of logs. Each driver of each one of these cars, they notice that the logs are moving a bit and are not securely tied down. Driver number 1, they assume that truck drivers are professionals and they know what they're doing, so the load should be fine, and they make no changes in their driving and continue to follow the log truck. Suddenly, the logs break loose and fall off the truck. Driver number one hits their brakes and swerves their car left and right, trying to keep from crashing into the logs, to keep from crashing into the truck and the other vehicles that's also around them, who are also slamming on their brakes and trying not to crash. That is a reaction. As after driver number one saw the warnings, they did not take any action at that time in order to make sure that they would be out of danger. Therefore, when the logs did break loose and started falling off the truck, they were right in the middle of the danger. Let's go to driver number two in the other car. After they saw that the logs weren't secure, they decided they were not going to continue to follow the log truck, but instead, they changed lanes, sped up, and passed the log truck, staying far in front of it. Moments later, in their mirror, they saw the logs break loose and all the other cars swerving all over the road, trying to keep from crashing. This is preemptive action. As after driver number two saw the warnings, they took action before anything had even happened, in order to make sure that them and their family would be out of danger as much as possible. So that's just a crude example of the difference between reaction and preemptive action. Let's look at a scriptural example of preemptive action. Mishli, Proverbs, chapter 6, verse 6. Go to the ant, you lazy one. Consider her halakot, or her ways, and be wise. They have no guide, overseer, or ruler, yet she provides her food in the summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you sleep, O lazy one? When will you arise out of your sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of hands to sleep, and then poverty will come upon you, and distress will overtake you. A couple more verses in chapter 30, verses 24 and 25. There are 4 things that are little upon the earth, but they are exceedingly wise. The ants are a people not strong, yet they prepare their food in the summer. Does not nature teach you? Corinthia Aleph, 1 Corinthians 11:14. The ant works in the summer to store up food for the winter. It is taking preemptive action to what it knows, by the instincts Yahuwah has given it, that winter is coming. So it goes out, searches, works, gets all the food it needs during the summer, and gathers all the food it can in the fall harvest time, so that they can stay inside the colony and have food to eat and survive through all the winter months. In other words, the ants are what people today call preppers. Used to be, all people did the same thing. My grandfather and my Abba and the rest of their family, all working together, every year they went out in the spring and planted huge crops covering multitudes of acres. Then all summer, they worked to help them grow. And in the fall, they had to harvest it all. Then they had to do even more work to be able to store it for the winter. All of it was done by a horse and a plow, a pick and a shovel. They had to do everything by hand back then. They worked hard every day just to put food on the table and to get by. Today, people don't think you should have to do any work for any reason, especially if you're talking about anything other than just working a weekly job. And storing food is only for crazy conspiracy nuts. You know, they throw out all the many examples. We could go through a lot of examples through scriptures like Noah. Yahuwah told Noah that a flood was coming. He told Noah to build an ark. Yahuwah could have spoke into existence a boat just like that. He didn't do that. He expects us to work. He expects us to prepare. Noah and his sons not only had to build the ark, but them and their wives had to gather food and to be able to store it, not just for themselves, but even for all the animals. They had to do a work. A lot of work is required. Let's go back to Netanyahu, chapter 24. But make tefillah, prayer, that your flight is not in the winter, neither on the Shabbat. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the Olam Hazeh to this time, no, nor ever shall be. This verse is not speaking about fleeing in the winter or on the Shabbat. Earlier I asked, what does winter and the Shabbat have in common? They both have to be prepared for. Before winter, you have to store up food, supplies. You have to make sure you're going to have the correct clothing for the weather that's coming, etc. Before Shabbat, food has to be cooked, beds have to be changed, clothes washed, showers taken, etc., etc. Everybody should know these things. The point being, you must prepare for them. Now, with that thought in mind, why do you pray that your flight is not in the winter nor on the Shabbat? Because you hope that you have already correctly prepared for what is coming. And that you, like the woman in Gilead 12, Revelation 12, have already fled into the wilderness to a place where Yahuwah will protect you, so that you will not have to flee when you are already in the winter or the Shabbat. As if you have already fled and have worked to prepare while it is summer and harvest time, which is the period of time which Yahuwah has given his people to get ready. That is why he gave all the signs in his word about these last days. All of which, by the way, are already either fulfilled or are in progress. So when winter or the Shabbat comes, you are already prepared and ready. But make tefillah or prayer that your flight is not in the winter, neither on Shabbat. You pray now that you won't miss anything, or forget to prepare in some way that will cause you problems when major events of these last days and this time the Great Tribulation occur. We can only see things from our perspective, which is very, very limited. Yahuwah sees everything. So we pray to Yahuwah that if there's going to be any need, that he allows us to understand what is needed now while we could still prepare, and that way we have it ready when the time comes. That is the entire lesson that is hidden in this verse. Work in the time that Yahuwah gave us to get prepared for what is about to take place. This is what we've been warning people about for many years. To get prepared while you still can. That time's just about out. I thought the time would have run out several years ago. And no, events haven't taken place in the speed that I thought they were going to. But I thank Yahuwah that he has given his people so much time and so many warnings and signs to get prepared. But as we have stated in past newsletters and posts, before this last presidential selection, if Trump was picked to be the new puppet, that nothing in the elite's agenda would change nor be delayed in any way. That it would go straight forward just as they have planned. Of course, after the selection, you had everybody running around saying they had defeated the globalists and all the elite were on the run. Trump was going to save America, rebuild the economy, stop the wars, etc., etc. Now, in the past week or so, a lot of that has went silent. A lot of people and even alternative news are starting to say, hey, what's going on? The elite played their Trump card. Trump is just a spokesperson for the camera. The ones who are actually in control are still in control. Obama still has more power and control than Trump ever will. Trump is who they have trained the people in America to hate. Not so much him specifically, but again, as we've stated before, it's what he represents. He's a rich white man. So when all these events take place, World War III, the economic collapse, terrorist attacks, etc., the people will blame the white man, Trump. And the elite will tell the people it's your fault. You voted for him. The exact same thing that they did and are still doing to the people in the UK after the Brexit, which we stated that's exactly what would happen before the Brexit was even voted on. There will soon be war here in the US, inside the United States, not just watching it on your TV or on your computer. Any of you who have been following the news at all, you know what is going on with the U.S. government in North Korea, let alone Russia, China, Iran, Syria, Somalia, Afghanistan, Libya, and who knows where else. The U.S. military is in more nations than we can keep up with today. A few events to take note of. These are just some things that's happened in the last couple of days. Here in the U.S., they are filling all the seats of at the local level of the Selective Service, or the military draft boards. This is happening all over the nation. This is the first time in more than 40 years that this has taken place. These boards is the ones who determine if you, in their mind at least, have a legitimate reason of why they shouldn't take you in the draft. So by filling all these boards, that means the U.S. is preparing to reinstitute the draft. We stated in past newsletters that this was very likely to happen due to the facts. Yes, most people would say, well, we have a very small military today in comparison to many other nations. Yes, that's what they can use. However, what will be more likely is they will use the draft as a way to round up all of the younger enabled men. Specifically, they'll take many others. They could take all the women as well. That's the all this feminist movements and all this other garbage of getting the women in the military and all this stuff going on. Well, when they institute the draft, they say, hey, you're all equal. You want to be equal now? A few other things. Trump, or rather the elite, is sending U.S. troops to Somalia. They also may send another 55,000 troops to Syria, which only a few days ago, Russia, Syria, and Iran warned the U.S. directly of grave consequences if the U.S. were to strike Syria again. Hawaii has now begun preparations for a nuclear attack, which Hawaii was actually one of the 4 targets that North Korea showed on a map. The other ones being, I believe, was Los Angeles, Dallas, and Washington, D.C. There's also been reports that the U.S. has sent 2 more aircraft carrier strike groups to North Korea, which would make a total of 3, because there's already 1 there. As my Abba, Moshe Eliyahu, stated the other day, they would just be setting targets out there. If North Korea used a tactical nuclear missile to hit the carrier, which is the largest target in the group, it would destroy the entire strike group, as a tactical nuclear weapon can be used to destroy an entire city. These aircraft carriers with all of their support vessels, which is what creates the armada that Trump was talking about, or a strike group, they are rather close together. So if a tactical nuke hit the carrier, there wouldn't be nothing left of any of them. North Korea has also warned that thermonuclear war could break out at any minute. Trump and Pence have both stated numerous times that the U.S. is going to strike North Korea. North Korea has also stated numerous times that they're not going to stop their nuclear weapons testing. China and Russia both have military assets in the region as well. So you have 4 major powers all surrounding North Korea, basically. That entire region, that entire area, besides South Korea. Only now in the last week or so is the news beginning to once again mention the 2 satellites that North Korea put up in the last couple years. which at that time, when they first put them up, the U.S. military came out and made a statement that they were failed communication satellites, as they were not receiving or transmitting any signals, and they would fall back to Earth in a few days. Well, as we stated at that time, if those satellites were weapons platforms for nuclear or EMP weapons, they won't receive or transmit anything until the command is given for them to launch. Well, the satellites never fell back to Earth, as the U.S. military stated would happen, and only now is the news and military reports showing concern if they are used to create an EMP at high altitude, which would take out the U.S. power grid. Understand, these satellites pass over the United States about 4 times a day. And again, as we stated back then when they were first launched and put into orbit, they don't go the normal orbit patterns of most satellites. Instead, these satellites, as far as the United States is concerned, they're coming up from the south. The reason that you would want a weapons platform to come up from the south across the United States, if you were planning on attacking the United States, because the United States has no missile intercept systems across our southern border. There's no protection. There's no protection on the ground. Everybody can just walk across the border, and there's no protection in the air. There's nothing to stop missiles coming in. Or if a missile was launched and detonated at a certain altitude, there would be nothing to be able to stop it before it got to that altitude, which from space is going to be fairly easy. 300 miles above the United States would take out the grid from coast to coast. There'd be nothing left. It also would take out probably a large portion of Mexico and even part of Canada. And all of this is besides all the other conflicts that the U.S. military is currently involved in. As we've stated many times in past newsletters and posts, the U.S. military has no business in any of these nations, nor interfering in the affairs of these nations. But the elite over the last 50 years have used all of these wars and conflicts to cause the nations of the earth to hate the United States, so that now, when the U.S. is destroyed, there will not be one nation who will really care, so long as they don't think it will affect them. In reality, when it does happen, and it will soon, most nations will be rejoicing. And I can't blame them, really, especially with all the nations and all the lives that the U.S. military has destroyed in recent years. So, will this in North Korea be used to take World War III, the war between Gog and Magog, full blown? It's hard to say. The elite have so many plans that they're all running simultaneously. It's very difficult to know which ones that they will actually take live. Just like 9/11, for instance, among many others. In any case, I think we're going to find out fairly soon. And it's not going to be much longer, as they have everything ready and prepared to take down and destroy the United States, which is the seat of this Babylonian beast system. After which, many other nations, which also make up Babylon, will also fall. So whether North Korea is used to kick this off or not, it's only a short time before it does happen. What is happening in Venezuela, with which we have made many posts about, the complete and total economic collapse of Venezuela and some of the other countries of that entire area there. It's not just Venezuela. But at this point, people are eating anything they can find. I mean, they've been eating garbage, rats, cats and dogs, and there's even been reports of them killing and eating each other. Cannibalism. Even with what is being seen there, it's going to be even worse here in the United States. Because of the fact people here are completely and totally dependent upon this system. They really have no skills of their own, as a whole anyway, to do anything. And with the huge amounts of people that is on all the government subsidies, with the dependence of people upon the grocery stores and everything else, it's going to get very, very bad very, very quickly here in the United States, especially. And it ain't just going to be the U.S. All the other Western nations aren't far from it. They're all very similar states of what the U.S. is in. That was just the highlight of a few events that's been happening in literally just the last couple of days. That's just a couple things that I thought were more important to take note of. There's so many events taking place, you can't keep up with the news. I couldn't begin to post them on Facebook, let alone put them into a video. But to bring this video to a close, it all comes back to where we started. Matthew, chapter 20, verse 20. Are you already prepared for the events that's about to take place, which the many multitudes of warnings are telling us are about to happen, which can be seen by anyone? Or will you have to react and flee in the winter or the Shabbat day when these events are already occurring? The time to prepare is going to come to a very sudden close. Salah. Pause and think about it.